Hey guys, my name is Z, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at how I shot this dance short film that I posted 2 days ago. If you haven't watched it, please do. I'll leave a link in the description as well. I've decided to split the behind the scenes videos into 2 parts, maybe 3, I'm not so sure yet, but in this first part we're just going to take a look at the shots and how I filmed them. In part 2, we'll talk about the editing that went into it. We started with an interview. This is an authentic story, we didn't make it up. One of the reasons why I love documentary type of filmmaking is you tell an actual story. In this case, our super talented character Leah's story. I sat down with her one day and asked her a few questions. Of course, I had prepped some questions that I felt would be relevant. The interview itself was about 30 minutes long, and from there I edited the interview down into a shorter version that was ideal to shoot for the film. Then I created a shot list, breaking it down into what I could film by myself with the resources that we had. After that, we set up a shoot schedule. A few weeks later, it was time to shoot. The first scene was in the morning at 8. It's not that early, but since it's winter, it was pretty cold. One of the biggest tips though that I've learned when shooting by yourself and you are on a schedule is planning and prepping as much as you can beforehand. My camera rig included a monitor, a top handle, left handle which needed to be attached, and I had cables running from the camera to the monitor, to the V-mount battery, and to a SSD. I set up the entire rig well before arriving on location. Actually, I set it up the day before, which saved me a lot of time. Once we were ready, we started filming. One of the reasons I loved this location is because of the pillars that are symmetrical. I wanted to have that central part in the frame and have her in the middle to draw that attention. If you've watched the film, you might be wondering, why is there no graffiti on the pillars? Well, I'm glad you asked. That was added in post-production, which I will talk about in part 2 of this BTS series. I of course started with the wide shot and then did some handheld close-ups. One thing I learned later on in my filmmaking journey is that you don't need a gimbal for everything. In fact, I don't own a gimbal anymore. When I really need it, I can hire it. But for the most part, especially the heavier your camera rig gets, I just go handheld. More so for dance videos like hip-hop, a bit of camera shake can actually add to the effect. For the close-ups, I wanted the sun to create a silhouette effect, and I was shooting on the shadow side, which I think came out nicely. When she was dancing, her shoes were also raising the dust a little bit, and that created a nice slight misty effect, which I loved. We spent about 10 to 15 minutes on the scene before moving on to the next location, which was actually at our church. In Leah's interview, she mentioned her time in the hospital, and there was no time or real reason to recreate such a scene. Moving on. Instead, using the gift of storytelling, I wanted to convey that sense of helplessness. The symmetry of the chairs in between the rows gave a good contrast of the black chairs against the light from the glass panels that are, well, they were on the side, but in this shot, they're all the way to the back. I think it worked well. I used a 100mm lens for as much compression as I could get to separate her from the background, since she was super close to the glass panel and everything that was happening outside that glass, I didn't want it in focus, so the 100mm macro really helped. We also filmed the scene with her wearing headphones, and I really need to get someone to film my BTS, because look at this shot. Like, what is this? Like, we can't even see anything. Anyways, my apologies. Let's move on. After this shot, we moved to the balcony scene. I scouted the area and eventually I settled with a shot where I was using the sun as a backlight. The location also had that nice wall to the right that added light contrast to the frame. I eventually shot this with my 18-35 lens. I tried the 100mm macro for close-ups, but it didn't really work out well, especially because I didn't have autofocus to save me. So for the close-ups, I just used the 18-35, I think at 35mm. And if you noticed, I actually used a small camera stand, which looks like a DIY project, because it is one. I made that stand myself. If you are subscribed to the channel, you actually probably watched that video, and I'm really loving using this stand because it gives nice ground level shots. One of my favorite parts of the shoot was capturing authentic moments, like how she was actually tired after prolonged dancing.
the moment I kind of found myself.
That was actually a moment after we had been recording for a long time. Well, a long time being about 5 to 10 minutes, which if you're dancing aggressively, that's actually a long time. So I kept on rolling the camera. Actually, I kept rolling the camera on most scenes throughout the shoots, even when the music had stopped, because I wanted to get those moments which I feel added to the storytelling of the film. On the second day, we shot a dance class scene, but I didn't record BTS because again, it was on the go and I completely forgot to film BTS. Anyways, the final shoot was at a parking lot at one of the malls in town. We shot it late afternoon on a Sunday in the hope that we'd find an empty level, and thankfully we did. And it gave us the freedom to get wide shots, which I absolutely loved. This was my favorite scene to edit because it reminded me of my culture. Technically, Pantsula is a Zulu dance. I am Ndebele, and somehow, technically, I'm Zulu also. Yeah, go argue with your ancestors. Moving on, they had a great dance duo and it only took about 15 to 20 minutes to film everything, and I absolutely loved it. Let's talk about the gear I used. I shot this on the Blackmagic 6K first generation and primarily used two lenses, the 18 to 35mm Sigma and the 100mm macro. I used a Moment Cinebloom 10% diffusion filter that added somewhat of a misty effect, if you want to call it. I think this is, I might be wrong, but I think this is the same as the Pro Mist filter that a lot of YouTubers use. I think, look, I could be wrong. Just let me know in the comments if I have that wrong, but I like how it adds a nice effect, especially to the lighter parts of your shots or the frame. I also had an ND filter from a company called Concept. Is it Concept? Yes, I think it is. It's not the best, but look, it works. It's amazing. I love it. I also used a monitor from a company called Neewa. I think Neewa. Hope I say that correctly. Shout out to my good friend J Humble Jack for lending it to me. I sold my monitor and still haven't replaced it. So yeah, make friends in the film industry and you won't need to buy stuff. I'm joking. Buy your own things. My rig included a top handle, a left handle, a tripod, and the little camera stand that I made. I used natural light for all the scenes, focusing on the time of day and location to get the best lighting I possibly could. There was no time to be setting up actual lights and all that jazz. I was shooting alone, so I had to go natural. I must say, light contrast in frames is something I have recently taken joy in exploring. It's amazing. The right balance between light and shadow can make your shots pretty dynamic, even without manipulating the light with actual video lights. So yeah, I think this is part 1 of the Keep Dancing film BTS. In part 2, we'll talk about the editing. I feel like there's some stuff that I would like to talk about there. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please let me know in the comments down below, and do subscribe if you haven't for more videos like this. Until next time, my name is Z and see you in part 2. Cheers!